I've seen this so many times now, and you've seen it 100 times more. I was very lucky to be an executive producer on the film and joined from the very beginning. And Nisha spent 8 years making this film. And it was an extraordinary testament of all of your commitment that this was nominated for an Oscar last year. But most of all, it was a testament to the art that you brought here. We're going to talk about the story, but the art of this film is that it is a universal depiction of human beings struggling for the chance to be heard, struggling to try to tell the truth of what happened, and struggling to be free. And what an uphill battle. I just wonder, we're here to talk about the messages of the film, but watching it again, I can't but help but think about this family first and foremost, and your experience with them. And I wonder if you'd say a little bit about where they are and where this village is.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Can you hear me? Here we go. Okay, there we go. That's better. Yeah, thank you all for being here. You know, as Atul said, he's been with us for the last decade. Now it's 10 years, and the film took 8 years to make. And the family, Jose and I were just talking about this actually, because this is sort of, you know, the final screening of phase 1 of the Stand With Her screening tour with this film, and we started actually in March, just around the 69 CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and the family was touring with us across the United States. So Ranjit and his extraordinary daughter Kiran, who's now 21 years old. And still wants to be a police officer. So I think the process of being documented, of having their story told in this way, of sharing it with the world, of getting in front of it, of being part of it, of having conversations, of using it as a tool to talk about gender-based violence and sexual violence has been such an empowering experience for them, especially her. You know, she's really found her voice as a result of this. And it's been such a beautiful journey, because I've known her now for 8 years, right? So just to see her grow. I think the film, maybe not so much the film, but certainly the journey of the family and the fact that they did what they did, and, you know, as just the fact that they did get justice, I think has been sort of an extraordinary thing for the community as well, and for the village also. And, you know, Ranjit often on our tour would talk about the impact of his decision, the impact of her decision to come forward, and how it's affected the community, how levels of sexual harassment have pretty much just kind of disappeared as a result of the steps that the family took. So there's been a tremendous effect, and the village is also starting to heal. So there's been cohesion. The cohesion is coming back, and the families are starting to speak and visit one another again. So, yeah. Even
the village chief has come around. You showed him the film.
Yeah.
And what did he say?
I showed him the film a few years ago, and terrified to show it to him, but felt like I had to, you know, in order to make sure that the family was safe, and, you know, just doing stress test screenings a few years ago before the big Oscar campaign, but, you know, just to make sure they were all okay. And he loved the film, and he said after he saw it that he was ashamed of himself, and he felt it was something that the community needed to see because it was clear that the community needed to understand what they had put the family through. And such is the power of empathy, such is the power of storytelling, really, yeah.
The film is amazing in shortened form, but if you want to see the whole thing, it is on Netflix. You can watch it anytime. But one of the things that gets cut here is Giganti's voice, the mother's voice, who speaks up, stiffens his spine a little bit at critical moments. And you can see her toughness come through in a few things she said here. And one of them was when she said, if we don't stand up for ourselves, they will always push us around. And I wonder, as you think about some of what you're teaching out of the film, what you're trying to bring to the communities as you look for impact and not just viewers, is that part of the message that you're trying to bring?
Yes, but not sort of like if we don't speak up, they'll push us around. It's more, it's what you said, like the film is global, right? It is universal. The messages in the film are universal, in spite of it taking place just in a small community in India. And a lot of that, I mean, if we think about the stigma of shame that surrounds survivors around the world who experience sexual violence, and it's not just girls and women, it's also men and boys. There's so much. It's very difficult for survivors to come forward. So we want to use the film as a way for survivors to come forward, and not necessarily in terms of seeking justice, because every survivor has their own journey. So it's really about whatever it is that they need, to heal. That's really critical. The other thing that's really critical for us is the idea, and Jose will speak about it. If I may just say, the idea of inviting men and boys, not indicting, which is what, Jose and Equimundo, this is what they believe in, right? That the need to sort of invite men and boys into the conversation. That's something that we feel very strongly about with the film, and because of the power of Ranjit and the fact that he did stand up. And I think, lastly, the last thing I'll say about this is, I feel like the power of this film is how it teaches all of us that each one of us in our own way can make the world better, that we have power to change. And I think all of us sort of have an internal moral compass, and we know what the right thing is to do. We know that, human rights and goodness is kind of our North Star. And I feel that that's something that's so important for us to put forth, and I think Ranjit really exemplifies that.
I'm going to turn to Ana and to Gabriel, and I wonder, out of your work and your experiences, where you are educators, you're trying to heal, and you're trying to prevent in the community more damage. What parts of this resonated for you? Were there moments that connected for you? Yes, Ana first.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. I think for me was the young lady's courage. Her coming and telling her story, being truth, but for her to open up, she needed a safe space. She needed a place where she understood that they're going to believe her, that they're not going to judge her, that they are going to wrap their hands around her. And that was her family. And in many cases, families look different. in the case here at school, sometimes, kids come to us, social workers, counselors, teachers, and they feel that they're accepted and they're welcome and they are not going to be judged. At the same time, they feel the opposite, right? And I think that is what impacted me the most. And as a social worker, that's what I strive to be someone that a child can, look and say, I can come to her without any judgment. And I think we have to see our kids with hope. We have to see every student that is judged because of the way they dress or the way they, are loud in the hallways. We always have to see the child inside and believe in them. And I think as a community, we should be that family for every survivor, for every child that has a story. It impacted, the other piece that impacted me was the leader, right, of the village. How he mentioned that women should bear responsibility as well. And that kind of, right? I'm sure you guys all went with me like, what the heck? Kick him out of the film. And I think, that what some of you know that I run a boys group, and one of the things we try to do is to try to show them a different path or educate in a different way, or, kind of dismantle those stereotypes. So, talking about, they come and they talk about their feelings, which they're not used to, right? They're vulnerable. They have pain. They don't know how to express it because men should not be expressing their feelings. And I think educating our boys about, that we all deal with not feeling, the best that we can be, that, like I was nervous coming here and I told everyone I'm so nervous. And some people will never say that, right? Because you're vulnerable. But we know that our kids are trying to express what they're feeling, but they don't know how. And masculinity is a concept based on our values here. And sometimes they put our boys into boxes. And if I speak about my feelings, I'm not, man enough. Or sometimes their sexual behavior is kind of what makes them men. So I think letting them know that we can think outside the box, and being masculine can be being kind, being soft, being vulnerable, being able to speak about your feelings. It's okay to cry. And I think that is what this film brings for me. And I will share, with the young men I am allowed or privileged to work with.
Your sense of opening a space where no one feels judgment, that's a lot of what I admire so much about you, Nisha, and this film, is you gave no judgment. You simply showed people very even-handedly all voices, including the chief. You get to see some of the village women in the longer form. And it's hard, some of it to hear, and hard for some of it to be treating with equal openness and letting them be heard. But you're also helping them all hear each other in a powerful way by bringing the film back to them. So that sense that we can be in a community together and manage to work through this while dealing with really fierce emotions and deep unfairness. Gabe, moments that stuck out for you considering your work?
Sorry. So, yeah, actually what you just said was something that was the first thing I said to Nisha, which was, I was surprised, and this is the longer version, which everybody should definitely see on Netflix. I was surprised how much I empathized with everyone in the film, including the villagers. You know, the behavior and the reaction was horrible, but when you watch the full version and you see the interview that the NGO does, the group that's going and talking with the people, and they're very honest, and they go and they talk with the villagers, and you really see how scared they are, that they don't trust the system. They don't trust the systems around them. They don't trust anybody outside of their village. They just want this horrible thing to go away, and they're willing to make these, what we view as completely wrong and ludicrous suggestions that she should just get married and, you know, we should just go on with our lives. And that was something that I actually started to really empathize with, and I was thinking about it afterwards, because then I saw it again with my wife, and I was like, well, why was I so focused on this? And it's actually my experience as a teacher, because, you know, I teach in the International Academy, which is my main job, but I actually do a lot of work with students who have been suspended or done bad things, who are coming out of detention or coming out of long-term suspension or coming back from the alternative schools. And I do a lot of work with their parents as well. And there's just a sense of like, you know, when I talk with them, you have to be honest and you have to be empathetic and you have to listen, or else this is just checking a box and the same behavior is going to happen again and again. And so when I was watching it, that's what really struck me, is that the way you shot the film, and also the way that you that we got to see how both everyone in the film really how they approached you know, talking about what had happened. Once they were honest about it, you really see them make headway, because it was. When you're listening to people and you're really giving them the chance to kind of express how they really view things, that really makes room to grow. And that was a space that I think was created by everyone, especially the nonprofit that worked there. But that's sort of the space that your movie also creates, and that's what we kind of try to create as teachers when we really want to make a change.
Jose, I want to turn to you. One thing, as I was watching it, thinking about talking to you a little bit, is that there's really different, within this film, different versions of what it is to be a man. Like Ranjit is one version of what it is to be a man. The ward chief is another version of what it means to be a man. The police chief was another version of what it means to be a man. The prosecutor. And I wonder what, say what you think about what Ranjit stood for, what kind of man he was proposing that we be, and how that resonates or doesn't resonate with some of your reactions to the film.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the first, before I go into that, I just wanted to appreciate what Ana had said about acknowledging when you're nervous. I'll break out of the man books and always say that I might be the only communications director of an organization that is always nervous to speak in public, so I'll just put it out there. But I think one of the most powerful things about this film that Nisha and the rest of the village that it took to put it together have produced and brought forward is that it's a film that shows us the worst that men can do. And at the same time, it shows us the best that men can do. So as you were saying before, it's not about indicting, it's about inviting. This is a film that calls out the harm, which we should always do. Whenever we see something that is wrong, we should step up, we should stand up and be able to point it out and say that's wrong. But at the same time, I think it's a film that calls men in. and that allows us to see ourselves and to model ourselves into a guy like Ranjit, who is coming from a space where he might not have had all the tools, where he might have not necessarily have all the words to be able to describe what had happened to him, to his daughter, to his family, to his village, but he's still willing to stand up with her, to show up with her, to be able to sometimes waver and be moved and strengthened by her and by his wife, and be able to do the right thing. So I think that it's a film that, as you say, shows us the different faces and the different type of guys that we might encounter, but it posits the question, which is the guy that you would want to be? Within this spectrum, would you want to be a guy that recognizes himself in the worst that men can offer? Or would you want to be a guy that recognizes in what Ranjit has to offer? At Equimundo, we work in 71 countries around the world, engaging men and boys for gender equality. And I think that sometimes when we talk about this idea of healthier masculinities, no one understands what that is. Sometimes we are very bad at describing what that is. But I think that we can all understand what being a good dad is. Being a good father is pretty easy to follow, whether because you had one or you didn't have one, because you are one or because you strive to be one. So I think that this idea of Ranjit as the model or as the beacon to follow makes a ton of sense. And after having met him, I was telling Nisha, I am very appreciative that I had the chance to meet them both, because this is the first time that I watched the film and I'm not broken right after, that I feel whole, because I was able to see them and see in Kieran's face joy, and see in Ranjit's face joy, as well as being able to take a step back and just see his daughter beaming in a room. So yeah.
He's a man of very few words, and yet he manages to let himself be so vulnerable in front of the camera. You know, he really falters at multiple points in the longer form of the film, and you see a couple key moments like that where in one moment it's Giganti who stiffens his spine. She's a little tough on him, in fact, a couple times in the film. Be like, come on, dude. And he appreciates that. And then that moment where Kieran gives him courage when he's becoming afraid that they will come for him, that he could die. And he describes her saying to him, well, if I need to die, I will do it. Is that, I want to ask you, Nisha, what did you think, how did you get to know Ranjit? You might say a little bit about how you found this story and who you thought you were going to get and who emerged.
You know, so I think everyone on the panel now knows the story, but when I began making this film now over a decade ago, I was making a very different film. I was making a film that was looking at masculinity in India and literally just exclusively following the work of the NGO. I don't know how much time was spent with the NGO in this particular version, but you know, there's an NGO that works with the family, and they were working in the state of Jharkhand, running a gender sensitization program, working with men and boys, quite like what Equimundo does.
This is the Srijan Foundation.
That's right.
Which they mentioned.
Yeah. The Srijan Foundation. So I was making this very different film, and it turns out that Ranjit was enrolled in this gender sensitization program, and that's how I organically came across his story and this tragedy and what happened. So the very first time I met the family, I was with my camera, or my husband was, you know, we had a camera with us, and we were following Amit. And we asked Amit if we could film him meeting the family, and he said, of course, if the family agreed. And Ranjit and Giganti allowed us into their homes. And, you know, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had no idea whether they were even going to pursue the case, because a few months earlier, there'd been another sexual assault case where the family had dropped the charges. So we weren't sure what was going to happen. We were just kind of putting one foot in front of the other. And and this extraordinary, when you see the feature version, the 2-hour version, you'll see like, it is such a powerful, extraordinary family. And Ranjit, you know, as you say, he's a man of few words, but he's got such a deep poetry and a deep kind of philosophical grounding. You know, he has a very strong, he questions injustice. I think he has a questioning mind. He has a very curious mind. And I think if you spend 5 weeks with him, he talks a lot. He talks a lot. And Kiki was like, we've got to put a chip in this guy because he would just wander off, and, you know. So, but yes, he's in the film. He's definitely a man of few words, but quite chatty if you spend 5 weeks with him.
What do you think, I'm going to open this to everybody, what do you think will resonate most for the students? Where does this film potentially connect for them? They undoubtedly, many would identify with Kieran, of course. And what do you see them taking away? Others may not identify with Kieran and may wonder where they fit into it. Sure.
So the first thing that came to my mind was I think that they would identify with the courage of the parents. You know, it comes out in this version for education with Ranjit, and then in the full version with his wife especially as well. What I know is that my students, no matter who they are, they have strong feelings for their parents, obviously. And to see the effect of that horrible act on the family of Kieran, and how the father was so courageous and was not listening to the naysayers in the village, and was not, and was going past the threats of violence and fighting against the injustice, I think would really resonate strongly with them. So first and foremost, it would be that.
I think it's the empathy. I think it's the sense of our kids nowadays. They talk about, you know, inequality, like they want to change the world. They want people to be safe. I think they resonate with those feelings in general, and they're courageous kids. They have so much coming to them, you know, with social media, with, you know, with things that are happening in the world. You know, everything is just hitting them left and right. What's happening here in, you know, in our schools, academics. But they're survivors, and I think they help each other. They hold each other's hands. Sometimes they call themselves, you know, at the same time we see the negatives, right, that are posted in the news, but the beautiful things that happen when when somebody comes and tries to console somebody else. Those are the things that I see, and they're palpable. They're alive.
Thank you. Jose.
Wow, I wish I had gone to a school like this one with teachers like this, but I'd say I hope that it's not that they recognize in the adults in the village, the adults in their lives. So I know less what is it that would resonate with them, but more what I wouldn't want them to see in us around them. Every once in a while, someone asks me, like, how do we get a boy to become caring and to become loving and to become kind? And I just say, you try to engage with the adults in their lives, not to break them and not to prevent them from continuing to be that. And so I'd say, yeah, but that for me, it's the hope that they see in the adults in their lives. They see the guys from their foundation, they see Ranjit, they see Giganti, but they don't see the rest of the voices. I'm also curious because there's some students here around us, so I would be curious to learn from there maybe afterwards what is it that resonates with them as well.
Well, I was going to ask Nisha, you got to spend some time today with the students.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I imagined that you telling them about making a documentary film and the struggles of that a lot of them might have identified with you or thought, boy, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. They were a lot smarter than me. definitely a lot smarter than me when I was their age. That was what struck me for sure.
What were you hearing from them?
Curiosity, real curiosity, and I would say very sophisticated.
Yes.
You know, like really interesting questions, right? Like much more interesting than I would really literally that I would have thought of when I was 17 or 18.
Any examples stick in your mind?
Ethics, you know, there were a lot of questions about the ethics of filmmaking, the kind of consent that I got. Did I show the family cuts of the film? You know, how did I feel about being a Western filmmaker going in and filming? So it was really, really, really interesting and nuanced, you know, very sophisticated, nuanced questions, I would say.
How did you answer?
With a lot of nerves, fearfully. But honestly, yeah.
Another question I want to ask you, this is a moment where, this is a film that is catching us at a very tense political moment. We're talking here about inequity, diversity, and a version of exclusion. And you have been touring around the country and giving discussions about things with words that are like gender-based violence, which are even using that term is now in question. So how are you navigating it?
Delicately, and I would say sometimes with trepidation, but often, and I had a very difficult conversation today with someone about a partnership, and I was really anxious about it, and in the end I decided that I had to move forward with conviction. I learned so much from Ranjit, really. I do. It's so simple, right? It's just about doing the right thing. You know what the right thing is. We all know what the right thing is, right? Human rights, equality. These are not negotiable. They're actually the thing that all of us inherit as human beings at the moment of our birth. We all deserve this. And so for me, I think to just always use that as my North Star and not to engage in conversations or debates with any kind of acrimony or judgment, but kind of sticking to my guns and sticking to what I believe in. I think is extremely important, especially at this moment that we find ourselves in.
That's what I especially want to thank you for, Nisha, is steering in this moment directly into the discussion rather than away from the discussion. The issues don't go away. The need for us to be able to talk about the reality of violence like rape and assault in our communities. This is hardly just in India alone. It takes different forms, but the need to be able to have a depiction of the human reality and all its complexity. And what I most loved now seeing this film, I hadn't seen it, since the election. And what I really appreciated now is that you got the whole community and all of their voices together. And everybody felt they could speak up from their point of view, and to Anna's point, not feel judged in doing so, and be able to argue it out. There isn't going to be consensus, but there's also not, there is forward motion, there is advancement, and people learn something out of seeing one another.
And as adults, we should be modeling that behavior.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say that on our end. First, I was taken by the trepidation that you mentioned, talking about the politics in this space. I think that I am from Ecuador originally, so I came from Ecuador a year ago to live in DC, and I was coming from a country where I was not feeling safe being me, and I now look at myself in the mirror and then watch the news, and I also see a lot of people that look like me, and I don't think I feel safe anymore as well in here. But I'd say that I think that there is a relevance and importance for us to model to others, but also to acknowledge that what Ranjit is doing is not something that was taught to him. There's this author called Sarah Hardy, who's a primatologist. She has a book called Father Time. I highly recommend it. She studies the biology of caregiving and fatherhood, and what she says is that after having studied for decades, she's able to affirm that we as humans and as men, we are wired to care. That this is not something that needs to be taught, that this is something that we're born with. And that if we lose it, we lost it because of our environment and because of the people that we had in our surroundings. But what she would say is that one of the biggest myths and lies of the human species is that we are meant to be independent. She would say that other animal species use their initial energy discharge to promote locomotor functions. So if you see a dog or a cat, they're born and they start crawling very soon. If you see a human baby, we're a little bit useless at the beginning of our lifetime. And what she would say is that we have that same discharge of energy, but that we use it to be able to see our moms, to see our dads, and to be able to connect. That we are not creatures that were meant to be independent, but rather creatures that were meant to be interdependent. And I think that we should lean into that idea of interdependence, in that need for connection, in that quest for acknowledging that we are all caring, that we are all here in this space to connect, and that idea of connecting is supposed to mean that we are here to be at service and to be at the disposition and to be useful for those who we have around us. If you do a quick Google search, for example, of men and the environment, all of the results are men destroying the environment, or men and women, and all of the results that will pop up are of men being violent against women. But we see that men like Ranjit exist. We see that men like the ones that we have in this room exist. So I don't know, my hope and dream for the immediate future is that whenever we pop up those search queries, we would start encountering different search results.
That is beautiful. I'm going to give you the last word, Nisha. Tell us about Kieran today, and in many ways the film gave her a voice. Yes. And we don't know what it would have been like if you hadn't been there to film. But tell us about how that has affected her. What has she said about what she sees on the screen?
Yeah. I will in 30 seconds. I just want to add, just to this conversation that you started so beautifully and that you added to, and that we've all sort of said really powerful things. You're talking about community, and I think for me, the older I get, the more I see that that's not just about my immediate, it's not just Toronto or North America or even India. For me, the community is starting to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I'd like to feel that I can hold enough space in my heart for humanity, that's the idea, right? There's a beautiful film that I saw a few months ago, and it's called The World is My Family. And that's very powerful, and I feel like if we can all just open our hearts, to actually invite everyone in and really care about all of us, that would be really amazing. In terms of Kieran, yeah, she's 21. Zara and I just actually spoke to her a couple of days ago. Zara and I we were so emotional. There were so many times over these 5 weeks that the family was traveling with us that she and I were so emotional. And it's just because it is a privilege and an honor. I'm going to get emotional I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but it is a privilege and an honor to see a child who's had something so horrible happen to her grow into this powerful, confident young woman for whom that past doesn't have to define her. It obviously has marked her. How could it not? But it's not the only thing that she's going to be. And she's taking something that was so horrific and a tragedy, and she's found meaning in it. And that meaning is to help other survivors. So it's very powerful. Yeah.
Well, Ana, Gabriel, Jose, thank you so much. And Nisha, thank you for you being here and the film.
Can we clap one more time? Thank you so much. Some of you know that we remember the Titans, and we want our panel to remember us, so we have a little bit of swag for them. Atul? Jose? And Nisha. Thank you. Thanks.
Really super quickly, all of you have these postcards. So they will take you, if you scan, they will actually take you to our website, standwithhercampaign.com. And you will find there you'll find information about what it is that we're doing, what the goals of the campaign are, how you can get involved. We have a ton of resources. We really made this film for people to take and to use as a vehicle in their communities, as parents, as educators, to really share the messages of the film. So we've got a ton of resources, just ways for us to have these difficult conversations with our neighbors, with our children, with our partners. So please use them, and follow us. And so keep up to date with what it is that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming this evening. We hope you leave inspired by the film and its educational messages. It is true that one person can kill a tiger, but it is a lot easier if everyone helps. Thank you.